Well, hello there. Hope you had a great weekend. It is Monday, June the 8th, 2026, and I guess you can tell we're back again for another week of fun in the sun. That's right, it's the War, Sports, and Dragons podcast, and as always, I'm David the Nerd Emperor, and I will be your host for these festivities. Again, I hope you had a great weekend. It was beautiful here. Got a little warm, but it's June. It's going to. And really sunny outside. Got to do a little bit of fishing. Oh, yeah. Did it without a license, too. Oh, no. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't. The boat had one, so we recovered. Anyway, as always, you can follow us not just on Spotify, where we began, but on Amazon, Audible, and iHeartRadio as well. I vow someday I will figure out why this thing is not listed on Apple Podcasts, and quite honestly, I'm a little irritated that that's become a part of my intro script. So we will get that straight eventually, but I don't know how many days there are in it eventually. Anyway, you can follow us on Twix. The handle is at the WSD Podcast. Got a lot of great stuff going on there. I am throwing out some bangers left and right, and sharing some great information and learning a lot of stuff too. Yes, even on Twix you can find information. I know, sounds crazy, huh? But meanwhile, if you want to help us get better technology, pay the ISP bill, etc., you can do it through Cash App and Venmo. Each handle is the same, WSPD Pod. We're keeping that extra letter P for now because, hey, we might need it sometimes. You never know when you might need a good P. We have a Patreon page for our subscribers to sponsor us, and it's as cheap as $3 a month for some of the premium content. It's patreon.com/WSDragons. You can get freebies plus special extra content. So check it out. There is a free subscription option, and you do get a few things, like the very first chapter of my first novel, Love's Crucible. The first 17 chapters, more than half in word count and in chapter count, as I recall, of my first completed novel, Love's Crucible, are on there now. Chapter 17 just went up yesterday. The first chapter, like I said, you can get that for free. You can become a sponsor and read the rest. And as all my future works come out for as little as $3 a month. $3. Just $3, and you can support a writer who's been writing all his adult life, literally since I was 18 years old. Now there are 31, count them, novels in the pipeline. I keep getting new ideas and adding stuff to the board, so it's going to be years before it's all done. They say that God puts you on Earth to accomplish a certain number of things, and right now I'm so far behind, I'm going to live to be about 260, so get ready for a long time as a subscriber because we've got a lot of stuff coming out. This doesn't include all the role-playing material that's going to be coming out, everything from maps to, gaming adventures for various systems to all kinds of stuff. So, stay tuned, hook up, sign up, and subscribe. It's going to be worth it. Everyone that does tells me that they enjoy it, and hey, that's what counts, right? But today we're starting this episode, as we often do, with the war segment, talking about military history. Specifically, today, June 8th, being the anniversary of the first time an aircraft carrier was sunk in combat by the guns of surface vessels. Now, as you might recall, last Monday I talked at length about the Battle of Midway, which was the third different battle in which an aircraft carrier was sunk by planes. Of course, the very first one was in, I guess it would have been, Midway would have been the fourth, because in February, the USS Langley was sunk by aircraft, land-based planes, off the southern coast of the island of Java in what's collectively known as the Battle of the Java Sea. Then in April, when the Japanese Navy, the Kido-Butai, the big carrier striking force that hit Pearl Harbor, it made a foray into the Indian Ocean in April and sank the British aircraft carrier Hermes, among other vessels. Then, of course, the following month, in May, each side, America and the Imperial Japanese Navy, lost an aircraft carrier in the Battle of the Coral Sea. The Japanese lost a light carrier, the Shoho, whereas America lost the Lexington, a full-sized fleet carrier, in that combat, and darn near lost Yorktown. Of course, the Japanese also suffered some significant damage with the Crane sisters, Shokaku and Zuikaku. One of them suffered significant damage and was essentially crippled, and the other one had almost all of its aircraft destroyed. So then that brought us, of course, to the Battle of Midway, wherein The Japanese lost 4 of the 6 ships that launched planes on Pearl Harbor Day, and America, of course, lost the Yorktown in that engagement. So we're going back a couple of years, though. Before all that, we're going to go back to 1940 and the HMS Glorious being sunk by German battleships. Now, really, not a lot is widely known about the Norway campaign of 1940, which started on April the 9th and ran into June of that year. But here's a little bit of background. Is Sweden, which borders Norway to the east, supplied a lot of iron ore to Germany, specifically Nazi Germany. Now, they had been supplying the Germans with iron ore for decades before this, don't get me wrong. But from 1933 to 1943, around 43% of the iron ore that the Germans used came from Sweden. And a good portion of that went through the northern Norwegian port of Narvik. Narvik is, I believe it's almost in the Arctic Circle. It's so far north. It may actually be. I forget where it is in terms of latitude. It's way up there, though. It is definitely northern Norway. So Norway was not involved in the war in the early months. It was neutral at that point, just being basically a transshipping point for Swedish iron ore headed south to Germany. But, well, each side had, kind of sort of violated Norwegian neutrality in one way or another. Here's how. In February, on the 16th, the British attacked and boarded and captured the German supply vessel Altmark. The Altmark had 299 British sailors on board who had been prisoners transferred from other ships. Specifically, the Altmark had been a supply ship for surface raiders in the German Navy, the Kriegsmarine. A so-called pocket battleship called the Graf Spee was, one of the ships that the Altmark supplied. And the Graf Spee, of course, was one of the pocket battleships. Basically, it was designed to kind of squeeze under the 10,000-ton ship size limit as required by, I believe it was the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922. I may be wrong about specifically what treaty it was, but I think it was Washington. Yeah. So anyway, the Graf Spee and the Deutschland, among others, were these ships that were supposedly 10,000 tons or less, but when you fully equipped them out and actually put all the guns on them and everything, they were way over the limit. So they were a treaty cruiser, allegedly, but they were really, Hitler was breaking the rules. Go figure. Next thing you know, we're going to have Nazis running for the Senate in the state of Maine. What is this world coming to? Anyway, Altmark was captured by the British, like I said, on February 16th, 1940, and some of the sailors who had been captured by Graf Spee were set free at that point. Well, this didn't sit well with Adolf Hitler, the Chancellor of Germany, so he basically ordered, let's get rid of Norway. Let's take care of that, and it, would have prevented the British from interfering quite so much in things like the Altmark hiding in Norwegian coastal waters, but it also would have helped secure that iron ore, which was important for the Nazi war machine. So, and this happened in April, but the night before the Germans officially invaded Norway, Britain had declared that they were going to mine Norwegian waters. So, again, each side was, kind of playing it fast and loose with Norwegian neutrality. The thing about it is, Norway, if you count all the different inlets and fjords, there are over 16,000 miles of coastline in Norway. 16,000. I think it might be the most coastline of any nation on Earth by far. A lot of little nooks and crannies. Glaciers carving basically valleys and ravines into the hilly terrain of that part of Scandinavia. So April 9th, in the early morning hours, the Germans launched Operation what was called Weserübung, or Weser Exercise, named after the Weser River in Germany. Several German naval operations were named after rivers, as we'd learn in due time, including Rheinübung, which took place a year later. But we're a year off from that, and we'll talk about that next May, to be specific. But in the meantime, the Norway campaign that started in April 9th started off actually fairly well in a way for the Allies, because German ships that were attempting to gain access to Oslo Fjord were attacked by the harbor defenses there, the fortifications letting loose with guns and torpedoes, and the heavy cruiser, the German ship Blücher, was actually sunk by the Norwegian defense forces, and I think another heavy cruiser, the Lutzow, which was originally named the Deutschland, but had been renamed Lutzow because of the sinking of the Graf Spee and Hitler's concern that they didn't want a ship named Germany to be sunk during the war. Anyway, Lutzow, I think, was also damaged, but things didn't go the Allies' way after that. The Germans took over the city not long afterward. I mean, there's even an instance of the Germans being so confident they had taken Oslo, I think it was, that some Ju-52 transport planes landed at the airport there and outstepped a marching band. So the Germans were incredibly confident that they would sweep the Norwegian army aside, and by and large, the Germans did handle the Norwegians without overly taxing themselves, let's put it that way. The Norwegians put up a brave fight, but they were, they didn't have their best equipment. They didn't have a very large army. The Germans were more organized, had air superiority, and to be honest, control of the skies dictated who won World War II. Granted, the biggest thing that won World War II was the ability to produce equipment and the logistics of it all, but it translated into massive air supremacy by the Allies in the final analysis. But in the early months, first 2 years basically of the war, the Germans had air superiority pretty much everywhere they went. They didn't have a superiority in men in tanks, specifically when they invaded France in 1940 or when they invaded the Soviet Union the following year, but they did have at least control of the air for the most part. Anyway, the Norway campaign by June of 1940 was winding down, with the collapse of Allied armies defending France in late May and into early June. The British Expeditionary Force had been withdrawn via Operation Dynamo, the impromptu use of private vessels to evacuate troops from the beaches in and around the French city of Dunkirk. That operation ending on June 4th, resulting in the rescue of around 338,000 total personnel. With all that happening hundreds of miles to the south, the Allies really couldn't hold the northern port of Narvik much longer either, and chose to withdraw their forces there as well. They had given the Germans there a fit. There are a number of notable battles, naval battles in particular, in Narvik Harbor. There are two that I can think of, I want to say in April, off the top of my head, that did not go well for the Germans particularly, but it got to a point where the Germans came up with Operation Juno, and here's how everything broke down. The German High Command, OKW, short for Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, had dispatched two sister battleships, the Gneisenau and the Scharnhorst, to relieve German troops in that northern port. And in the end, it worked in part because the Allies were evacuating. We could get into some of the particulars of why the Norwegian campaign didn't go well for the Allies, like French ski troops landing who didn't have straps for their skis. Little things that added up, but by and large, they got pretty much outfought by the Germans. But again, the early parts of the war were the learning period for the Allies. Thankfully, we survived it. But meanwhile, as Operation Juno was taking place, there was an operation, I'm trying to think, I think it was called Operation Alphabet, which was a plan by the Allies to withdraw troops and materiel from the Narvik area. And sent there to help facilitate that was the Glorious. Now, the Glorious was an aircraft carrier, and the thing about it is it was the second of three Courageous class. Now, it was originally, like the Courageous and one other ship, They were built during World War I as battle cruisers and actually carried 15-inch guns. But in the 20s, these ships were refitted as aircraft carriers so as to keep the UK in compliance with naval tonnage limits set by the Washington Treaty of 1922. She was among 66,000 tons of ships converted to carriers. On a side note, the Courageous, the first ship in that class, and also a converted World War I era battlecruiser, was destroyed by a German U-boat the previous autumn, becoming the first aircraft carrier sunk by an enemy during wartime. So the Courageous class did not have a lot of luck in World War II. But in any event, moving on. The Norwegian royal family, led by, and I gotta admit, I really like this man. I really do. The indomitable King Haakon VII had considered fleeing to Sweden when the Germans invaded, but get this, the Swedish government had said it would, quote, detain and incarcerate, unquote, him if he crossed the border into Sweden. That statement was something that Haakon would never forgive, and I can't say as I blame him. I mean, seriously, this is your neighbor nation, and you're being attacked by an aggressor, and they want to put you in jail for fleeing to safety? That's insane. But in any event, on June the 7th, the king and many members of his family and staff boarded a British cruiser and were transported away. He stayed in exile, basically, until the end of the war. Now, on June the 8th, accompanied by the destroyers Acosta and Ardent, they took part in Operation Alphabet, and they were set upon in the Norwegian Sea by the two aforementioned German battle wagons, as well as the heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper and 4 German destroyers. The task force was headed out to sea, but they didn't get out quickly enough. And at 1545 hours on June 8th, the highest lookout on the Scharnhorst spotted what they referred to as a dust cloud. By 1600, so within 15 minutes, it was confirmed sighting of an aircraft carrier 29 miles away, which would put it just over their horizon, realistically. As the Germans closed, the British, something you need to understand about British naval doctrine in World War II in particular, the British were known to be very aggressive, even when they were outnumbered and outgunned. It was simply part of their training, and the fact that the Royal Navy was so massive, and it was, I believe, the largest fleet in the world when World War II began. If it wasn't, it was a close second to the United States. So it can't have been smaller than number 2, but I'm pretty sure it was number 1. In any event, the Ardent did its bulldog best and fired her 4.7-inch guns against the German battle wagons and destroyers and launched torpedoes. The Ardent also made smoke to help obscure vision of the carrier, of course, make it harder for everybody to do the range finding and target the aircraft carrier. But there were a lot of mistakes made on the Allied side in this battle. For instance, the Glorious did not have any combat air patrol flying, so there were no planes out looking around for enemy air attacks. Had there been any CAP in the air, it's doubtless that they would have seen the German task force approaching. Not only was there no CAP flying, there were no ready aircraft on deck, and there was no lookout in the crow's nest. This to me is an unbelievable oversight. You're in a war zone trying to evacuate troops and planes, and you're not even on lookout. You're not running a combat air patrol. Yes, granted, the Germans did not have aircraft carriers, but you gotta have your CAP up if for no other reason than to scout around. That's the aircraft are the eyes and ears of naval forces. Anyway, let's talk about the number of large ships that had catapult-launched spotter planes. Anyway, at 16:27 hours, Scharnhorst fired at Ardent, and 5 minutes later, at a range of 26 miles, opened fire on the Glorious while closing at top speed. At 16:38, an 11-inch shell hit the carrier. Now, this was at a range of 26,000 yards, so 15 miles away. The Scharnhorst scored a hit on the Glorious, hit the forward flight deck, pierced a hole in it, exploding in the upper aircraft hangar and instantly starting a big fire. There were 2 Fairey Swordfish fighters being prepped for launch. Now, the Swordfish, known as a string bag to some of its pilots, was a biplane. And you might think, oh God, biplanes? What are they going to do? Well, they actually proved their mettle not just the following year, as we'll learn in an action in the North Atlantic against a large German ship, which we won't name right now. Later in 1940, these were the type of plane that would essentially cripple the Italian battle fleet in the Italian port of Taranto during a nighttime raid where 4 capital ships suffered heavy damage at the cost of a single biplane. So these were good aircraft. They just hadn't seen a lot of battle testing yet, but they were being readied on the deck. They got destroyed by the blast. Things continued to get worse. At 16:58, another shell hit the homing beacon above the bridge on Glorious and killed or injured pretty much everybody on the bridge, including its captain, Guy Doyley Hughes. Hope I pronounced that right. Now, for the next 22 minutes, the Germans couldn't make her out through our smoke screen, so the damaged flat top got a little bit of a respite, but that ended abruptly at 17:20 when another shell hit near her center engine room. Now, there had been fragments that damaged a steam boiler earlier in the fight, and it caused a temporary loss of speed. Well, this time, it really just crippled her ability to get away, not to mention that the Glorious began to list to starboard and was stuck in a slow turn to port. So incredible damage done by this other shell hit. 5 minutes after that, the Ardent went down, taking 152 men with her. Now, sensing that the kill was at hand, the Germans closed the distance. Glorious went under at 18:10 hours, and then Acasta sank 10 minutes later. 160 men went down with Acasta or Acasta. I think it's called Acasta. I don't know for sure, but Acasta. I like getting the pronunciations right. Sorry, Indy. Anyway, Ardent did manage to put a torpedo into Scharnhorst before she was sunk, and that did significant damage, but it wasn't enough to put that battleship out of action. Now, the total loss of life on the British side in this engagement was around 1,529, over 1,200 of those going down with the stricken carrier. And Glorious, of course, then became the first carrier sunk by direct naval gunfire in maritime history. She would not be the last. We would see that a couple years later on the other side of the world. But again, I'm leaving you what we Dungeon Masters call adventure hooks. This is stuff we're going to learn about later on. This, again, is another story for another day. Now, the aftermath of all this, well, the last Norwegian troops left their country the next day, June 9th. The German conquest, by default, of course, was essentially complete at that point. Norwegian patriots continued to fight in a resistance movement and for their captive nation in other manners, variety of capacities for the remainder of the war for the Allies. The Swedes stayed neutral through the war, but continued to supply iron to the Nazis until November of 1944. That was, of course, 6 months before VE Day, and I guess I'd have done the same, giving up in November 1944. I mean, since Finland, right next door, had capitulated via an armistice with Stalin in mid-September, I would say the last thing the Swedish government wanted was T-34s rolling through the streets of Stockholm and Luleå and Malmö. Norway remained occupied until the end of the war, Hitler stubbornly holding on to the nation as a base for its surface ships, such as the Scharnhorst, the Gneisenau, and the massive Tirpitz, a sister ship of the Bismarck. Bismarck, of course, is well known for what it did shortly thereafter in the war. But again, another story for another day. We've already alluded to it with talking about the Swordfish. The main body of German forces in Norway officially surrendered on May 8th, 1945, VE Day, in accordance with the general capitulation of Nazi Germany at the end of World War II in Europe. The date is still celebrated in Norway. They call it Frigjøringsdagen. It means Liberation Day, basically. King Haakon, originally born Prince Karl of Denmark on August 3rd, 1872, And we could go into his life. We could go into that, but that's a long, fascinating story for yet another day. See, there are so many things that we could talk about, but we just can't fit them all in. But King Haakon, well, he returned to Oslo, the capital, to massive fanfare on June 7th, 1945, which was, as it happened, exactly 5 years after he left his embattled nation. He spent much of the rest of that year touring Norway and looking at the damage that had been done by the war. He would rule until his death on September 21st, 1957, at the ripe old age of 85. So there it is. There's your war portion for today. The discussion of the first time surface vessels had their dream scenario. Basically, it was the perfect storm of bad circumstance for the British and the Germans getting lucky and happening upon this task force at the perfect time. And surface vessels learned later on that they really needed to close range with aircraft carriers, because if they couldn't get within gun range, the carrier would probably sink them. That's something that was learned in the Pacific in particular, and that's why I am not a member of the battleship lobby in the long-running argument over which is better, battleships or aircraft carriers. So when President Trump is talking about building a new class of battleship, I think that's an unwise idea. No Navy in the world, to my knowledge, has built a new battleship in almost 80 years, and there's a reason for that. So it's really cool to have a prestige ship and all that, but, we have the USS Constitution, we have the Constellation, we have all the museum ships that we already have. We don't need a big battle wagon that's going to be obsolete as soon as it slides into the water. I just don't see the utility of having battleships nowadays. I don't. Prove me wrong. Oh, that's right. You kind of can't. But let's move on to sports. Oh, boy. I guess it's time to lament the latest works of mediocrity by the Baltimore Orioles. The Orioles are 31-36. They dropped 2 out of 3 this weekend in Toronto. They won the first game Friday night and then crapped it up over the last 2. Now, granted, in one of the games there was a bad call, I think, with a runner going out of the baseline for Toronto and the umpires not acknowledging something that they plainly saw happen. And it led to Toronto scoring more runs, I believe, in that inning. But it's not like the Orioles didn't have 9 tries to score during the game. So, you can blame an umpire. You can blame Don Denkinger for Game 6 all you want, 1985 St. Louis Cardinals. But you still got to win the other 3 games you lost to the Royals if you want to, or at least one of them, because you went 7 and went 3 and 4. But yeah, you can't keep blaming the officials. The officials aren't the ones that are striking out so much. And let's get into the stats here real quick, okay? Here's the thing. I had estimated that the Orioles would go, I think the first estimate I had was 88-74. I was very optimistic on the Orioles. I thought they would possibly contend for a playoff spot. Now, no. They will not be making the playoffs. You heard it here first, you heard it here second. Not going to happen. And all you guys that were, I'm not going to use the term I used on Twitter, but those of you who are giving yourself the illusion that the Orioles are close to the wild card spot. For one thing, it's frickin' June, and for another thing, they won't be then. I'm revising my estimate of 88-74, which I had already revised down to 77 and 85. I'm going to knock it down to 75 and 87. I think if the Orioles are not careful, as the season drags on and the players start to feel the wear and tear of 162 games, granted, there's a lot of platooning going on, and these guys are not getting enough at-bats to qualify for the batting title, so they're not going to be as worn out as some other players might be, but I think that's a detriment in and of itself. Right now, the Orioles are on pace for 76 wins, and I'm saying 75 and 87 because I'm an Orioles fan, and I'm used to disappointment, so I hope they don't collapse late. Young teams like the 2002 Orioles, who I boo-hooed on here about them, did that just down the stretch. I hope that doesn't happen, but the numbers right now do not look good, and let's go into them a little bit more at length. Batting average, Overall, out of the 30 teams in the major leagues, the Orioles are 17th. They're hitting .241. Now, one thing I did notice is that compared to batting averages of just 10 years ago, or especially 20 or 30 years ago, the majors by and large are not hitting for the average that they used to hit for. Now, granted, it's not 1968, the year of the pitcher, where the whole majors hit .237 and 1 game out of 5 was a shutout. But the Orioles are in the middle of the pack hitting .241. I think the best hitting team is hitting around .270, which, if you look at stats from like 1983, you would see teams like, say, Kansas City would be hitting .290 at this point as a team. So the majors, by and large, are not hitting as well, but they're in the middle of the pack. So an average team in a league having a below-average year at the plate is not a good look. But to make up for not hitting, they're striking out a lot. The Orioles are 6th in the majors in strikeouts. Interestingly, though I was complaining, I believe, in the last podcast or the one before it about how they're not drawing walks, the Orioles are 7th in the majors in walks. They're 3rd in the American League. They're 2nd in the East behind the New York Yankees. Overall, out of the 30 teams in runs scored, they rank 8th. They're 10th in homers. So what this means is the Orioles are living and dying by the long ball. They're a team of Rob Deere. Okay, if you look at Rob Deere's numbers, go to retrosheet.org. I strongly recommend that site. Again, Dr. Dave Smith and the people at Retrosheet are doing yeoman's work. Baseballreference.com uses Retrosheet's stats. Okay, Retrosheet is not just some obscure website that nobody's heard of, that nobody uses. Retrosheet has done some amazing work. And I've actually helped them a couple of times with little things like pointing out when a player got ejected from a game in the mid-'80s, how it wasn't mentioned in the box score, and, some of the context of what all happened. But anyway, Retrosheet is a great website, retrosheet.org. Free website. You just go, look at the stats. You can look at play-by-play accounts of pretty much every game in the 20th and 21st century in Major League Baseball. There are a lot of play-by-play accounts from the Negro Leagues, which were incredibly hard to find documentation for, that are going up on the site with regularity. They've got the stuff, guys. If you want baseball stats, the raw stats, go to Retrosheet. Okay, like I said, baseballreference.com uses them as their source. They rely heavily on them. All right, but anyway, back to the Orioles. Let's talk about their pitching now. Out of 30 teams in the league, the Orioles pitching staff is 24th in strikeouts. Only 6 teams out of 30 have fewer Ks on the bump than the Orioles pitching staff. That is not good at all. But here's the number that really worries me, is that the Orioles are next to last in opposing batting average. Okay, whereas the Orioles themselves are hitting .241, their opponents are hitting .263. That's 22 points difference. It's almost a 10% difference. That's not good. And when you play that out over a 162-game season, that's why I think the Orioles are going to finish not very far. They're going to finish a bad weekend away from 90 losses at the rate they're going. I don't want to see it. I'd love to see them win every game the rest of the year and win every playoff game and sweep the World Series, but it just ain't going to happen. Okay? 1983 was a long time ago, but I remember it clearly. Okay? I remember Cal Ripken catching that last out, that line drive, even though he had gone 3 for 18 in the World Series that year against the Phillies. I remember the glory days of the Orioles. Okay, Cal and Eddie and Earl Weaver, even the 2 years, as my friend says, when they went Joe out to belly up, including the 1983 World Series season. I remember the good old days of the Orioles. It was a good time. They had some moments in the 90s. They had some moments in the 20-teens. But there have been a lot of lean years for the Orioles, and a lot of years where they've done really well, as recently as just a couple years ago, where they won 101 games and then crapped it up in the playoffs. So I'm not expecting great things. But back to the batting average. They're 29th out of 30 teams in opposing batting average. There's only one team that's worse, and that's the Colorado Rockies. Okay, for context, the Rockies play 81 games a year in Denver, which is a notorious launching pad. Okay, even when they have terrible years, the Rockies tend to be among the league leaders in batting average and home runs because the air is thinner and the ball just flies off the bat up there. Okay, as I recall, I may be wrong, but I don't think there's been a no-hitter pitched against or in a Colorado Rockies home game. There might have been one, but there haven't been two. Now, talking about ERA, earned run average, the Orioles are 24th in the league. They're the 7th worst in earned run average. We won't talk about fielding because every team has their fielding foibles, and, ERA is what it is. But WHIP, walks and hits per innings pitched, the Orioles at 1.41, I think it is, are 5th worst in the majors. They're 26 out of 30. They're 13th out of 15 in the American League. Only the Astros and the Angels are worse than the Orioles in walks and hits allowed per inning pitched. And I will never get used to the Houston Astros being in the American League. Okay, so to the commissioner, dude, get your head right. Put the Brewers back in the American League. Put the Astros back in the National League. Realign your divisions properly. Get it together and do the right thing, okay? Ugh. Don't get me started. We won't talk about the pitch clock and the ghost runner crap at extra innings, and we won't talk about that extra wide first base and the little gloves that they got to put on their special hands when they slide. We won't get into all that. Okay? And I can safely tell you that if the Orioles were undefeated, I would still hate those rules. But, then you get to walks. So we're talking about WHIP. They're almost at the bottom of WHIP. Then you get to walks. Not good. Out of 30 teams, they're 12th in walks allowed, and that's not the number you want. You don't want to be in the top 12. You want to be in the bottom 12. You want to be as low on this list as possible. They're in the top half of the majors. They're 7th in the American League. Again, they're in the middle of the pack. So they are showing all of the hallmarks of a team that's fair to middling, doesn't have great numbers, and the trends are not looking great. They are playing a little bit better baseball than they were 3 weeks ago. They're playing .500 ball now, but they're playing just good enough to stay just a hair under 500. 75 and 87 might sound brutal, but it's really only 6 wins away from being 81 and 81, which is a .500 season, of course. So, yeah, they have one really good week. They might end up 500, but I don't see the Orioles winning 7 games again this year. If I'm wrong, you're going to hear about it. You're going to hear that. If they win 7 in a row, I will be on here very happy for them. But I don't see it happening. Basically, depending on how you look at the stats and average, it feels like the Orioles hitters think they're Harvey's wall bangers. That was the nickname given to the 1982 Milwaukee Brewers after Harvey Keene took over from Bob or Buck Rogers. But they're not. They don't have that caliber of... Granted, that Milwaukee Brewer team did not hit for a great average. They had significant power, banged a lot of doubles off the wall. That's why they got called Harvey's wall bangers. But their pitching looks more like a team destined to say they're rebuilding yet again. I think the wait-and-see part now for the season is over. They're 66 games in. They've played 40% of the season now. They're not good. They're not going to catch fire unless something drastic changes somewhere. I honestly believe that a new coaching staff and a new front office, they need to just clean house. I think that's in order, but apologists are going to say, well, the manager's only had 2 months. Okay, fine. But let me ask you this. Can you please name me another multi-billion-dollar business where you can perform this poorly and keep your job? You can't. Okay? What are the Orioles worth? $6 billion? They're mismanaging the crap out of this franchise. And, hey, that's just the way it is. And unfortunately, it appears that's the way it's going to be for quite some time. But let's change gears and let's get back into the fun stuff. We're going to talk about dragons now. Oh, yeah. Specifically, Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to go back to the 30-day D&D challenge. We're on day 17. Day 17 is name your favorite animal or insect or arachnid. Well, you know what? I've been playing for 44 years, so I'm going to name one of each. I think I've earned it. Animal. My favorite animal. There are a lot of them that I could name, but the one that jumps out at me is the Armvorax, the Golden Gorger. 3 feet and 200 pounds of golden furred mayhem. Okay, it's very easy to pick the Aramvorax. It is an 8-legged honey badger / lion / God knows what hybrid that can tear you and everyone else who looks like you a new one. Okay, this creature gave my party a profound bit of trouble in a 2nd edition campaign in 1996. Oh my, that thing was almost as bad as the rabbit from Monty Python and Holy Grail. Okay. This gun is nasty. The thing about it is, you look at the Aramvorax in 5th edition, and it's like a lot of other monsters in 5th edition. It's been wussified. It's been wimped down. Claw bite from an 8-legged creature. Full please. Okay, come on. In 3.5, it has 5 attacks and the grab special ability, whereupon it rakes its victim if the DM knows how to run one, basically. Plus, it's immune to poison, has damage resistance of 10 slashing or piercing, which means unless you're using a sword or a dagger or something with an edge to it, it's going to ignore the first 10 points of damage you do. And their young can be sold for thousands of gold pieces and trained as guard beasts. Now, the adult versions, you can't really do anything with them. But if you can get a hold of their kits, then the young Golden Gorgers can be trained. Imagine having them guarding your palace. Anyway, the 2E version, here's the one that ate us up and spit us out. The 2nd edition version can hit you with 2 to 8 claws for damage. It hits as well as a 12th level fighter and is as heavily armored as a knight in enchanted plate armor. The 2nd edition version can ruin your day. So I highly recommend the Aramvorax, Aurumvorax, aka the Golden Gorger. Great creature. Very nice. And think about the fact you can actually train some of them as guard animals. Oh, great creature to use. Insect, I got to go with the Sturge. Those little bastards can drain you of constitution and leave a withered husk of characters at pretty much any level. The Sturge is one of those creatures that you could actually send against any level of opponent. Okay? Just as is, straight from the book, send the Sturges, because they do special things to your special people. And nothing like having gigantic mosquitoes from hell coming after you, draining your party's blood, and having you drop on the spot. The illustration, I believe, from the 1st edition Monster Manual, showing a man covered in them who's basically collapsing from the blood drain, is a perfect encapsulation of what they're capable of doing. And I strongly recommend the Sturge as an insect. For arachnids, I got to go with the phase spider. 8 feet long, 700 pounds. They can shift through planes of existence to move around to attack, and they're just nasty. I don't make a habit of using creatures with poison, but these guys I will throw at a party from time to time if they're digging around somewhere underground, maybe in an old wizard's crypt or some ruin of an ancient city. Plus, the poison in 3.5, which is the version I've played the most, wasn't save or die. It did constitution damage. So, yeah, you'd be weak and you'd suffer a temporary loss of hit points, but you'd get them back after a while, assuming you survived. So, I strongly recommend the phase spider as arachnids go. They're fun. They're easy. And they get around. So there it is. There's your day 17 of the D&D challenge. Got 13 days left. Got some great topics coming up with that. And now we come to one of my favorite new segments, Florida Man of the Week. We do this on every Monday. Monday's our big day for stuff. So this podcast will run a little longer as a trend than the Friday one will be. This past Friday, we've already gone longer than last Friday's podcast by 5 minutes, and we're going to go a little bit longer still. But Florida Man of the Week this week came out Friday night, or actually, Saturday afternoon, actually, this story came out, but it happened basically late Friday night. Florida man rams police cruiser, claims he did it on purpose. This comes to us from WFLA's Sophia Fanning. A story was posted Saturday afternoon around 1 o'clock Eastern. Dateline Clearwater, Florida. A Fort Myers man was arrested early Saturday morning after the Clearwater Police Department said he intentionally rammed his car into one of their officers' vehicles. It happened around midnight on Saturday, involving an F-150 marked CPD car and a Kia Soul driven by the suspect. The driver was identified as 28-year-old Garrett Burr of Fort Myers. Photos from the scene, however, appear to show a Texas license plate, so maybe he moved into the area recently. Who knows? But in any event, he is now a Florida man. CPD said the officer was waiting at a red light at the intersection of Gulf to Bay Boulevard and US 19 frontage road in Clearwater. For unknown reasons, the Kia accelerated into the officer's car, striking it near the rear passenger side tire. Police said that Burr told officers that he struck it on purpose, but would not say why, and he refused to answer any further questions. The officer in the vehicle that was struck was taken to a nearby hospital and treated for minor injuries. Burr was arrested and charged with aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, which is a second-degree felony, according to the Clearwater Police Department. So congratulations to our Florida Man of the Week, Garrett Burr. You're a damn fool. Whew. Next segment, Showtime. And folks, this is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I'm going to recommend whatever I want. This just came out on YouTube, so it's free on YouTube, and I honestly have been waiting for the longest time to see this film again. I've only been able to watch clips here and there because the whole thing's not been available on any free service that I could find for months and months and months. And it is Kelly's Heroes, 1970 film, filmed the year I was born. The movie was made in Yugoslavia, and the divisional insignia that I'm pretty sure I saw on the uniforms of a lot of the guys in the film were of the United States 35th Infantry Division. Now, for a little bit of context, the 35th ID landed in Normandy after D-Day and was involved in the huge battle. It's Texas National Guard guys. They were involved in the large battle for the very important road junction city of San Lo. Now, San Lo was a battle that was fought from July 11th to July 18th between the kind of dinged up, they had suffered some casualties, U.S. 2nd Infantry Division and the 35th Infantry Division against, among others, the German 352nd, which was really kind of a coastal defense division that had been fighting against the Allies since D-Day on June the 6th. So after 4 plus 5 weeks-ish of fighting, the 352nd was pretty dinged up. West End Games, here's something funny. West End Games made a game called San Lo, which allowed you to refight the battle on, I think it was a battalion level game. But the thing about it is I figured out a way, and you don't need to cheat in these board games. I figured out a way to get an American unit in San Lo itself on the very first day of the battle. So once I figured that out, I lost interest in playing that game. So if you're looking for a World War II simulation of a battalion-level tactical battle, I guess that might be small operational level, don't pick San Lo by West End Games. It's not a very good game. It only has the one available scenario, the straight-up fight for the city, which lasted 8 days. Don't play San Lo. It's not a good game. But in any event, the 35th ID, along with some other units, we won't get into all that, but basically that was the divisional patch that I saw on the shoulders of a lot of the guys in the film. The cast for Kelly's Heroes is just a great cast, okay? Starring the great, the legend, Clint Eastwood, okay? But it's also got Don Rickles, Telly Savalas, Donald Sutherland, Carol O'Connor, Stuart Margolin, Harry Dean Stanton, and others. Telly's brother George plays Sergeant Mulligan, whom Big Joe, played by Telly Savalas, actually refers to as Mulligan, you son of a bitch, in the opening minutes of the film. So it's got some of the best dialogue imaginable, such as this line.
I thought I told you to bring me some good-looking kid, not this fat, saucy stew and wino.
It's got great action scenes. It's got hilarity in the action scenes, like when a Sherman tank comes up behind a tiger and fires a shell at the backside of the tiger that turns out to be paint. Donald Sutherland, of course, playing Oddball, who's basically a hippie in World War II. He almost steals the show. I gotta admit, he adds a certain amount of character to the film that I think is necessary. The premise of the whole thing is basically that fat sausage-chewing wino, that German colonel that Kelly kidnapped, that's Clint Eastwood's character, that Kelly kidnapped, has information about a bank in a city that is behind German lines. And this would be, I want to say this is set around early September 1944. So summer's still technically going on. Weather's still nice, very sunny. And it's in that headlong dash across France that happened after the Allies had broken out from the Normandy bridgehead. It's got everything. It's got teamwork, it's got jokes, it's got action. There's a great scene where they walk across a minefield and have to crawl their way across it, and there's some great exchanges in that scene. Don Rickles says, I found a mine, and Telly Savalas yells back, what kind is it? He says, how the hell should I know? It's the kind that blows up. It's just a great film. And Don Rickles, so many different actors in this film almost steal the scene away from Clint Eastwood. That's what makes it great. The cast was well cast, well acted, well done all around. It's got Don Rickles at one point getting trapped in an outhouse that's hit by the concussion of a nearby explosion, and he and I think it's Harry Dean Stanton get covered in guess what? So what's not to love? The movie runs about 2 hours and 12 minutes. It's worth all 132 minutes of your time. Even the theme song, Burning Bridges, is a great song. And I, again, highly recommend it. So you get a chance. If you haven't seen Kelly's Heroes, go on YouTube, look it up. It's free. And when I watched it, there was an ad at the beginning, and I don't recall there being any ads for the rest of the film. So don't tell YouTube. Shh. Don't tell YouTube they forgot to put ads in it. So there you go. There's our movie recommendation. Now, podcast trivia. I don't remember if I asked this question Friday. I did give the answer to the previous one, but I'm going to go ahead and ask this question again. And the question is, where did Dwight David Eisenhower, Ike Eisenhower, the famous general and later president of the United States, injure his knee playing football? Who was he playing for specifically when he hurt his knee playing football in his youth? We'll tell you Friday and give you another question as well. Now we're going to move on real quick to weird facts. Okay, my wife, as I've told you before, works for the Postal Service, so any silly stuff involving the Postal Service I always get a kick out of. I haven't told her about this one yet, so hopefully when she listens to the podcast she'll hear it. But today, June 8th, 1959, the United States Postal Service delivered airmail by missile. A couple of red and blue postal mail containers were put inside of a Regulus 1 missile and launched from the USS Barbaro, which was a submarine. The missile landed 22 minutes later at a military base in Florida, and the test was considered a success. However, the thing, it didn't catch on. The method did not end up becoming widely used. I can imagine why. But I can tell you right now, it would not surprise me if it has been used to deliver other things in other capacities to other people for other reasons. We'll just leave it at that. It's hard to put anything past the U.S. military because we think of some wild stuff. Okay, if you ever want to read something hilarious, look up online when U.S. Marines outsmarted an AI robot. Okay, our troops come up with some of the wildest stuff. You would definitely enjoy reading about that. Now, we're going to go to our Bible verse of the week. This one is from the book of James, chapter 1, verse 12 in the King James Version. Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. Now think about that. If, to be honest, let's look about, this is about perseverance and fighting for what you believe in, and hanging tough when things around you seem pretty bleak, because there's something good at the end. Remember, I peaked at the end of the Bible, and the good guys win. So, all right, trust me on this one. But to be honest, though, if anything is incredibly easy to acquire, is it even truly worth it? Now, granted, a lot of material things fall under this category, but I'm talking about greater goals. Like, for instance, what happens when you die and your soul has to spend eternity somewhere? Because I know we all have a soul. Trust me on this. Ironically, even though perseverance and maintaining your faith can be hard, the reward is not only infinite, it's free. And anyone, including you, my friend, good listener, can have it. So anyone who wants to talk about faith is welcome to communicate with me through the Patreon page about it. I would say send me a message on Twix. You can send me a tweet, but don't send me a direct message, because I do not answer direct messages on Twix. Too many bots, too much spam. I hope you don't play that. I just don't bother with DMs on Twix. So if you want to talk about it, I might not be able to necessarily head you completely in the right direction, but I bet I can connect you with someone who can. So if you ever feel like talking about it, you know you're more than welcome. Final thought. A little bit long for a final thought, but we need to get into this real quick. The life cycle of a democracy is an 8-stage circle. At least in this theory that was first put into these words by Scottish historian Alexander Fraser Tytler. Phase 1 of the life cycle of a democracy is when men go from bondage to spiritual faith. People start in slavery or under dictatorship, but then they find unity and they find their resilience through their religious convictions. From spiritual faith to great courage is phase 2. The faith that it inspires people to seek a better future. And that's where the courage comes in. The resulting bravery takes us into phase 3, courage to liberty. It leads to a revolution where we throw off the yoke of tyranny and establish a free society. Phase 4 is from liberty to abundance. With newfound freedom, the society's productivity skyrockets, creating great wealth and prosperity. Phase 5, we start to get back on the downward angle of things. We go from abundance to complacency. The wealth that's created with the newfound freedom breeds comfort, causing the population to become self-satisfied and to lose its civic drive. Phase 6, complacency to apathy. Citizens begin to take their liberties for granted, showing little to no interest in public affairs or the greater good. Here's an example, and I'm guilty of this. Okay, I do call myself out for screwing up too. Someone said something on Twix the other day about how do I get out of jury duty? And I was going to respond with a surefire method to do so. I will not share that method here. Though I do have my dislike for certain aspects of how our alleged justice system functions, I must confess this much. Jury duty, while a bit of a nuisance, is something that we need to do. Think about it this way. If you evade jury duty, the person taking your place might be the kind of person that wants to set criminals free because, as is the case with a recent trial over a black guy charged with murdering a white guy at a track meet. This is a teenager charged as an adult killing another teenager. One of the prospective jurors was struck from possible duty because they said, I just couldn't see putting a black man in prison. Now, this is someone who murdered someone, stabbed him to death in front of other people, according to the reports. And if you don't serve on a jury and help people get justice for their loved ones who are the victims of crimes like this, then you're probably going to be replaced with somebody who's going to let them go free. Maybe not probably, but it's a possibility. So, I know it's jury duty. I know you got to miss a day of work. And I know how much everyone just loves going to work. And I know you get $15, maybe $25 for the whole day doing jury duty, and it can be a pain to park, and it can be boring sitting through things, and it sucks to have to check the answering machine, and so on and so forth. But you know what? It's one of the things we need to keep going if we want to function as a decent and high-trust society. Because if juries can't be selected, then, to be honest, that's the Sixth Amendment. We've already got enough stuff going on that's an assault on our Bill of Rights. Let's not let it get any worse. So, Phase 6, complacency to apathy. And here's where we get a little foggy on where we are in this 8-phase life cycle. Because to me, I'm seeing parts of Phase 6, parts of Phase 7, and parts of Phase 8. Phase 6 is complacency to apathy. Like I said, where we don't take a lot of interest in public affairs or greater good and take everything for granted in terms of our liberties. Well, the thing about it is, Phase 7 is from apathy to dependence. Having lost their ambition and vigilance, the people willingly trade their self-reliance and freedom for government-promised security and financial handouts. Sound familiar? Like how politicians are basically bribing us with our own money? Like how Benjamin Franklin said that a nation or people that sacrifices their liberty for security deserves neither and will end up with neither? Yeah, seeing a lot of that in our society nowadays. It's not going well, is it? And then that takes us to Phase 8, from dependence back to bondage. So, to sustain this dependency, the government amasses uncontrollable debt. Sound familiar? Resulting in economic collapse. Again, sound familiar? Bankruptcy, and a return to authoritarian control or bondage. Just to put this into proper perspective. When the founders wrote the Declaration of Independence, they listed, I believe it was 23 grievances that they had with King George III. Things that he did that they did not like, that they felt were onerous, that were an unnecessary burden and signs of a tyrannical method of running the colonies. Our current government commits over a dozen of these things. Under Barack Obama, we got up to 16. I think we're at 13 now. So, left wing, right wing, same bird. Where are we in this life cycle? We're way past Phase 5, abundance to complacency. We're a mixture of 6, 7, and 8. Complacency to apathy, apathy to dependence, and dependence back into bondage. Okay? And remember, folks, rights lost today will probably not be restored in your lifetime. And I say this to young people. So, be careful. We're long past Phase 6, to be honest. We're in the mix between 7 and 8 now, I would say. And 8 isn't good. 7 ain't great, but 8's bad. 8's very bad. So, let's not let that happen. Let's prove this long-dead Scotsman wrong, please. I would really appreciate that. So, as Thomas Jefferson said, the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is its natural manure. Now, I don't know exactly what that means in today, the political climate of today, but I'm telling you right now, the tree's going to need watering down the road. Just saying. But we're going to wrap things up for the day, so make sure to follow this show on Twitter. The handle is at the WSP. Sorry, that's a holdover from back before the reboot. The handle is the WSD Podcast. More stuff is coming in a variety of formats. There's not enough time in the day. Like I said, God puts us on earth to accomplish a certain number of things. I know I'm going to live at least 200 more years. So, there you go. Help sponsor us through our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/WSDragons. Join us there. Sponsorships start at just $3 a month. You can help us upgrade our equipment and pay our operating expenses via Cash App and Venmo at both. It's WSPD Pod. And as always, you can hear us on Spotify, where we began. please follow us there, as well as iHeartRadio, Audible, and Amazon. So thanks again for listening. This is Dave the Nerd Emperor. We're wrapping up Season 2, Episode 3 of the War, Sports, and Dragons podcast. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourself. Free Iran, and we will talk Friday.